brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Aloha mai kako. You are watching Hawaii Political Reporter.
Thank you for watching Hawaii Political Reporter. On tonight's show, part 2 of our economic series with Alex Merced, another great music video from Dorian Electra, this time Roll with the Flow, and Moani Akaka gives us her opinions on the state takeover of the Big Island. Wednesday, a very special program on worldwide economic events and how they affect us in Hawaii. We begin our show with something you won't see on expensive corporate TV.
My name is Gary Johnson. Be libertarian with me for one election. Live free.
Speaking of externality spillover effects, externalities or spillover effects are when one thing in one area affects another thing. Okay, so for example, an easy one would be hygiene. Okay, good hygiene and bad hygiene have externalities. If I have good hygiene, that's a good externality because people are going to feel much more comfortable. Like for example, I ride the subway to work every day. If I have good hygiene, okay, people are going to have a much more pleasant ride on the subway. If everyone on the train took a shower, put on some deodorant, put on some cologne or perfume or whatever, everyone's going to smell pleasant. The train's going to smell pleasant. Everyone's going to have an enjoyable ride. That's a positive externality. Everyone else's ride is much better because of something that somebody else did, not necessarily for their own good. Okay? But if everybody on the train, or if I sat there and I decided to not take a shower for like a week and not shave and whatnot, and basically the whole train stank because of me, okay, everybody's ride has now been negatively impacted, and I'm creating a sort of a negative problem for everybody else because of my actions that had nothing to do with them. Okay, those are externalities. So the idea is where your actions, your decisions, suddenly affect somebody else vicariously. Now, how do you deal with externalities is a different case. So this is another place where sort of left-wing progressives think government should play a role in sort of internalizing externalities by subsidizing positive externalities. So basically, for example, in the case of hygiene, that you'd be paying people to clean themselves, and not necessarily paying people, but you'd maybe establish public showers, okay, public facilities for people to clean themselves, okay, and then basically then you would tax the negative subsidies or negative externalities in the sense that you would tax people who don't clean themselves. Okay, maybe establish like a fine or a penalty for not having good hygiene. Okay, that would be sort of the left-wing progressive way of handling externalities. A more libertarian way of handling externalities is saying, let the third party, let those people figure it out. So basically, those people on the train, they could get into a different car. Okay, now that has other problems, like it causes, or the subway provider could make a rule saying that, you know, you can't smell bad, or you'll be removed from the train. Okay, there'll be other ways of dealing with it. Another example would be sort of like lawn mowing and stuff like that. So for example, if everyone mows their lawn in a particular neighborhood, everybody's properties will be worth more. If someone doesn't mow their lawn and takes care of the house very poorly, it drags down the value of the house of everybody else. Okay, so then people might create sort of neighborhood boards or neighborhood organizations, in effect, to control who moves in and out of the neighborhood. So basically, if you create these sort of co-ops and whatnot you might be familiar with, what happens is if you want to move into one of these neighborhoods, the board has to approve of you. If you want to do anything in this neighborhood, the board has to approve of you. So you voluntarily give up some control of your property to this board in exchange for them trying to control the externalities. But it's not necessarily in the same sense a government coercion where basically you didn't have a choice, you did have a choice. So there's ways of achieving the same effect, but it's sort of involuntarily market-based ways. And the thing is, if you don't let that innovation occur, it doesn't. Transaction costs, okay? So for example, people always say, well, if you just raise the amount of taxes in a particular place, people will just move, okay? But statistics show, actually, a lot of times people just don't move, and that's why places can tax more, okay? And it has to do with a lot of reasons. But one reason is transaction costs, okay? When you move from one place to the next, you have to rent for movers, there's also the transaction costs of moving, other than just the movers, buying boxes, okay, security deposit on your new location, the wait, and then you have to still pay rent on your old place, and switch over your utilities. These are all transaction costs that make the whole idea of moving very, very unpleasant. So in that case, people, even though if you raise taxes, they may not necessarily rush to move. Or sometimes you may see a road that would be a quicker way to get to where you're going. Okay, so in a world without the transaction costs, going down this road would be the obvious rational decision, but you don't make that quote-unquote rational decision because of the transaction costs, because the road that would be faster has a toll on it and you don't want to pay the toll, so instead you take the longer route. Okay, so transaction costs go a long way in affecting how people make decisions. Cultural costs, okay, so instead of it being like a toll road, these are costs basically have to do with culture. So for example, let's say you're going to one country and next. If you're in Europe, okay, in Europe you can freely travel between the different countries, but a lot of them speak different languages. So let's say Germany typically has a fairly high wage labor market. Well, but if you live in Greece, you can't just move to Germany unless you know German, okay, because they don't speak Greek there. Okay, so basically the cultural cost makes it hard for you to make the choice that's rational instead of, in a sense, moving to the higher wage labor market, etc. So again, the reason why people don't make decisions that necessarily are the better decision often is because of these other miscellaneous costs. Social norms. So, for example, if you practice any kind of lifestyle or activity or whatever that's outside of social norms, and you're looking to enter a certain labor market that's outside of their norms, it'll be harder for you to enter that market. So it's not that you don't want to enter that market, but there's a cultural cost, okay, or beliefs. So for example, if you're part of one religion who has a very hostile relationship with another religion, you're not going to be able to enter labor markets, nor maybe you'd want to enter labor markets that are necessarily of higher wages. Okay, so you may not pursue that higher wages just because either you or they don't want to associate with each other. Okay, so these are sort of cultural costs that have to do with sort of the culture that you participate in. Okay, and then there's political costs. Okay, now politics is not just politicians and government and all that stuff, but it's also people and influence. Okay, there's people in any community that build influence, and they're not necessarily always politicians. Sometimes it's a real estate agent who just knows everybody in town, or a particular older woman who just seems to get around and everyone knows. Okay, but they have a certain amount of influence in the community, and if they make certain decisions that may be rational on their part, or maybe to their benefit, something that they want to do, there may be political costs which determines why they don't do certain things. Okay, so for example, a lot of gay politicians don't come out of the closet. Why? Because of the political cost of doing so. Okay, a lot of politicians don't introduce bills that would otherwise, one, not only be consistent with what they say they want, but be good for society as a whole, but because of the political cost in doing so. Okay, you sacrifice some of that influence when you make certain decisions. And a lot of people don't like to sacrifice the influence they have because there's a lot of benefits to having that political influence. And again, when I say political influence, I do not mean just in politics in the sense of government policy and legislation, but also in just the ability to have a deep level of influence in everything that goes on in the community. Okay? Rent seeking. This is sort of any kind of arrangement in which someone manipulates the economic environment to make money without making wealth. Okay, so for example, when we started off this video, we discussed people making voluntary transactions and how after the transaction, both people have more than they started with because they have something that they want more. Okay, and there wealth was created. Both people are more wealthy than they were before because they have something that they value more. Value was created. Okay, sometimes people will strong arm people. Okay, so basically, typically through government, but could be through other cultural norms. Okay, for example, someone placating to a particular religion to say, hey, you know, priests, why don't you advocate everybody to come shop at my store? Okay, so someone exerted influence and got more business, not because necessarily they created any more value than they did before, but because they created rules in a sense. So basically, or to be more a bigger example would be like coaxing a religion into making a rule, making it like evil to shop at a certain place. Okay, now that would create more business for the people who don't fall into that category, not because of any action on their own part, just because you've shrank the market. Okay, or politics putting in licensing requirements, which artificially shrinks labor markets, which means that the people in that labor market make more money, but that extra money, that's not because of real economic factors, but because of someone manipulating the economic environment in their favor. So that's called that would be a rent, that extra money. Okay, so they aren't necessarily doing more than they were before. They're not necessarily more valuable than they were before. But if you control supply or artificially increase demand or something like that through political, cultural, social institutions, through manipulation of them, you are rent-seeking. And generally, most people on both sides of the aisle of any political ideology has issues with rent-seeking. Okay, it's just a lot of times it's not very easy to define or see what rent-seeking is sometimes. Because sometimes one person's rent-seeking is another person's activism. Labor markets. People like to work. Okay? Not that they don't like to work, but they need to feed their kids and their family and stuff like that. So in that case, you need to find someone who's willing to pay you for work so you can have an income to provide yourself, family with goods that you need to live and survive. Okay? So there's the demand for labor, people who are willing to work for a wage, and the supply of labor, people who are willing to sell their labor for a wage. Now, what kind of things will affect where that equilibrium point will be? Technology, okay? Basically, if technology gets better for creating a particular good, that might reduce the demand for that labor, since each individual will be more productive, or you might be able to replace them altogether. So in that case, that demand may fall. Okay, it may create new labor markets. So for example, while the internet and technology has gotten rid of a lot of need for like physical delivery of mail and stuff like that, it's also increased the demand for programmers and other types of high-end labor. So in that case, education would definitely increase the labor markets for that. Okay, because if you want to be a programmer, you need lots of education. Okay, so increased education would increase the people available for that labor market. Economic growth. If the economy as a whole is growing, okay, more labor markets will develop. Okay, in the sense that people are creating more value, resources are being more efficiently allocated, all that good stuff. As the population grows, there'll just be more people wanting stuff. So there'll be much more opportunities for labor markets to form. Okay, politics. Okay, politics, as you saw, we talked about with rent seeking and several other ways, can affect labor markets. Wage controls. You can change the price of wages and you can do the same effect. Control wages too high, force wages to be super high. What you'll end up with is a surplus, a shortage. Okay, so basically the cost of labor will be too high. There'll be a surplus of labor because people won't buy the labor. And if the price of labor is too low, you'll have a shortage of labor. Labor organization, okay, that can manipulate the price of labor depending on what kind of demands they make. And industry consolidation. So if a lot of firms within a particular industry start buying each other out and merging and whatnot, well, then there's going to be a lot of overlap in the things that people they have hired. So they'll need to reduce staff. Okay, so these are just several different things. These are not everything that affects the labor market, but you guys get the idea. Okay, equality and mobility. Now, income equality, mobility. Now, the terms equality and mobility just mean two different things. Equality just means the difference between the lowest and the highest. So the lowest and the highest are closer together. That's more equality. and mobility is just the ability for a number to move up or down. Okay, so people can talk about inequality and mobility of anything. Okay, but specifically, I think most people care about income equality and income mobility. But you can throw any kind of word in front of inequality and mobility and make it an economic issue. So cultural inequality, cultural mobility, political inequality, political mobility, okay, etc., etc., etc. So you can throw any kind of word in there. But specifically, we want to talk about income, okay? So income inequality is when the disparity between low-income earners and high-income earners is very high, okay? Which means that generally that correlates highly with income mobility. A lot of studies are showing, okay, which makes sense because of a lot more people are stuck in the upper ends and a lot of people are more stuck in the lower ends. Okay, what's going to happen is people have a lot less mobility on the downside and on the upside. Okay, and let's explain it this way. Okay, mobility is your ability for your income to move up or down. So basically, if you work real hard, you can increase your income by getting some more education or investing in some technology or whatever you can do. You can increase your income through your efforts. But by those same efforts, if you make a mistake, your income can go down. And people always talk about income upward mobility, but people never talk about downward mobility, which is just as important, because people need to be able to make mistakes, and other people need to be able to make and have successes and failures that sort of help reallocate income. Okay, so the people at the top need to be able to fall down if they make a mistake, and the people at the bottom need to be able to fall up if they make a good choice. Okay, and if you fall up from the top, where do you fall? In the middle. And if you fall up from the bottom, where do you end up? In the middle. And overall, that means incomes should be more equal. Thus, you're going to have a strong middle class. So a strong middle class is actually a sign of strong income mobility and strong income equality. Okay, they go hand in the same. Because the idea is if any income market is competitive, income should be evenly distributed. So if you have a income market where you have a very uneven distribution of incomes, okay, it's because that labor market's not very competitive. And again, why it's not competitive could be for a variety of reasons, some legitimate, some not. Okay, but these are sort of the reason why these things happen. And human capital and development. These are things that you can do for yourself to make yourself much more valuable in an economy. Okay, so you can become a healthier person. Okay, you can become a smarter person, a more skillful person, have better hygiene, be a much more socially able person who can be fun in conversations and overall pleasant to be around. All these things will make you a much more valuable person and thus afford you a higher income. Okay, people don't want to work with people that are unpleasant, that smell, that can't do anything, and frankly always out sick. Okay, so improving upon these things make you more valuable. And a lot of countries have figured, well, if they can improve these factors in all their people, their economy will be that much more stronger. So this field has been known as development. So whenever they talk about human development or economic development, they're generally talking about developing human capital. So improving people's health outcomes, education outcomes, social outcomes, etc. Just making people better people, in a sense. Okay, and making sure that they're living better lives. Okay, because in a sense that'll make the economy better. Okay, and again, you can think about that as you wish, but the idea is so that when you're aware of these ideas, again, there will be a part 2, and a part 2 we'll talk about different schools of economic thought. So those who are waiting for me to mention, like Austrian economics, Keynesian economics, all that stuff, I will be doing that in the next video, along with like sort of government policy and all that. This video was more just to introduce to you a bunch of different economic ideas, so that way you can think critically about economics. My name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. Have a great day and enjoy.
darling, I know you know everything about me, but tell me a little something about yourself.
Here's a little something about a girl like me. I demand to understand the economy. And I got a lot of questions been sitting on my mind. So let's sit down, take the time to review line by line. How can you roll with the flow you can't foresee? How can you let go control and let it be? How can you roll with the flow you can't foresee? How can you let go control, leave people free? Roll with the flow. Each one of us makes choices based on knowledge that's unique. Circumstance of time and place, preferences and taste all shape when and where and what we buy and sell from week to week. Collectively, these choices make up the economy. Economic growth to me, a mystery. GDP, GMP, it's really killing me. By what means do we measure wealth? A major indicator of economic health. How can you roll with the flow you can't foresee? How can you let go control and let it be? How can you roll with the flow you can't foresee? How can you let go control, leave people free? Alright, here it goes. I'ma give it my best shot. See, wealth is what is valued, and value is subjective. What one values depends on one's perspective. So don't make much sense to measure wealth objectively, factor quantitatively, study scientifically. Cause one man's trash is another man's treasure. One man's pain is another man's pleasure. One man's work is another man's leisure. All things you must remember before you start to measure. Can someone please assist me in becoming a good economist? My buddy Bastiat has given me a key. He says the bad economist looks only at the obvious, that which can be perceived immediately, looks only at the first effects, ignores all further consequences. Every choice has opportunity costs. Choosing one thing comes at the cost of foregoing your next best alternative. You can spend in one direction and say, it's peachy keen, but alas you have forgotten that which is not seen. Sure, if you break my window, the glass man gets some dough. Where would that cash have gone had that window not been broken? Instead of to the shoe man, now I can't buy those shoes. That's the cost of destruction, and someone's gotta lose. We could produce guns for a disaster war, or we could use funds for what they're best used for. Who knows what best is? No one mind knows best for sure. What does this leave us? Left up to each one of y'all. Can someone please assist? I wanna be a good economist. Keynes, he won't stop calling, he keeps blowing up my phone. He wants to teach me something, and he won't leave me alone. I tell him there's no use in trying, cause Friedrich Hayek is my guy. And if you wanna get with a girl like me, you got to let go control of the economy. I said, if you wanna get with a girl like me, you got to let go control of the economy. How can you get with the flow like me? How can you let go control your enemy? How can you get with the flow like me? How can you let go control your people free?
A Green Party president means an end to unemployment, to foreclosures, to student debt, to climate change, and an end to corporate rule. We're not talking spare change. We need a revolution. That's what we deserve. What we don't deserve is pandering, irresponsible bullshit that passes itself off as campaigning. I can't believe I just said that, but that's how I feel.
I'm voting for Jill Stein!
Vote for Jill Stein!
We need a green president!
Vote for Jill Stein! We need a Green Party president!
That does it. I'm voting for Jill Stein.
We need Jill Stein for president!
Vote for Jill Stein!
I'm Jill Stein, Green Party candidate for president, and I approve this message.
My name is Moani Akaka. I'm with the Aloha Aina Education Center. A handful of us started the Native Peoples Movement to protect the land and for justice over 40 years ago, over in Oahu. I'm also a former trustee for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs for 12 years. Relating to energy. First of all, we on the neighbor islands are here by choice, and we do not want our quality of life destroyed for Oahu's electric lights. Solar energy, the sun is free, is our best bet for alternative energy. We have the sun is free, and in fact, that's probably why we don't have more solar energy. Because if they could, if Hilco could charge us for the sun, I'm sure there would be more. There would be more solar energy. We need mass solar energy projects in these islands, and we do not want to industrialize the neighbor islands for Oahu's electric lights. Aloha Aina means to love the land, to protect the land for the present and future generations. We here on the Big Island want to live in tune with the environment. We do not want to destroy and industrialize the neighbor islands for Oahu's electric lights, while they on the best agricultural land on Oahu, they grow more subdivisions instead of food to feed the people.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You seem to have a publication here in your hand. Can you tell us, this is something you do, right?
Right. This is our Aloha Aina newspaper.
Let me hold it up in front of me, because I know they want to look at you, not me.
Aloha Aina, ea. As I said, Aloha Aina means to love the land, to protect the land for present and future generations. The original Aloha Aina newspaper was from here in Hilo during the time of the Queen by Joseph Navahi and his wife. They had the original Aloha Aina newspaper. This is a photograph taken in the late 1800s of the newspaper in downtown Hilo.
Let's see if we can get a close-up for that.
Please do. And Navahi was an emissary to the Queen. He was an emissary to the Queen. He was an educator. He was an attorney. He was a Hawaiian patriot. And our newspaper follows along these lines. We work to preserve the environment and for social justice. And part of our concern is the Public Land Development Corporation, which is a PLDC. Is the acronym, and this is our lands that were left over left to us by our ancestors. The state, the governor, is now in the process of trying to develop into ignoring environmental laws, zoning laws.
In 1913, the money power of the country was taken away from the people, but it was given up in the Federal Reserve Act. The Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express.
You try a hide and destroy a freedom man. You seek agenda, we know you anti-American. You come forward American Constitution. 1913, corrupt in the system. Devalue dollar, hyperinflation. The Federal Reserve, controlled by Lisa Farm. He can see you lying.